So now we'll look at my top 10 models. These are my top 10 models to use within the case study exam, both to use and also to apply your revision to. So in a sense, to go through the pre-scene and then apply and analyze the information given to us within the pre-scene within the context of these models. And so count down the top 10 most useful models to use in the exam in your revision. Starting with ethics. Now, ethics is one of the most important topics to use in the strategic case study exam. And ethics comes up on average in 2 to 3 of the variants. And so of course there's 5 variants, and in every single sitting since the case study was first started in March 2015, there's been an ethical question in 2 to 3 variants, which means that 40 to 60% of you watching this right now will likely get an ethical question in your exam. And it's important that you always look at areas in which you can apply the CIMA ethical principles, because of course CIMA appreciate when you use their ethical model, they stand by their ethical model, they act very ethically themselves and expect you to act very ethically. And so a key thing would be to look at the CIMA ethical principles. So of course integrity, confidentiality, particularly with regards to sensitive things like the data that we keep on file. We keep a lot of private information of our subscribers on our database. We need to ensure that that material is kept secure, that it's kept safe. We don't have a Cambridge Analytica and Facebook or Uber issue where we are sharing private information. Professional behavior as well, acting in a professional manner. Essentially what that means, we're not cutting any corners within our operations. We're not trying to cut costs in a way that impacts on the overall quality that we provide. Objectivity as well, not basing our decisions on our own or other people within the organization's personal, subjective desires, wants and needs. Professional competence and due care as well. In a sense, just not doing anything that is going to lead to a negative result by carelessness. And so when you are applying the CIMA ethical principles, what you should do is look at them in a way that you are applying the relevant ones. And what I mean by that is when you get a question on ethics, don't bring up the CIMA ethical principles and look at every single one individually. Okay, so this is a CIMA ethical issue. We can use the CIMA ethical principles to analyze this. The CIMA ethical principles include integrity. Integrity is this, this, and this. Confidentiality is this, this, and this. Professional behavior is this, this, and this. Only use the one that is, or the one or two, depending on how many it is, that are relevant for the organization, or relevant for the question that is being answered. For example, if the ethical issue up for debate within the exam is one of integrity, then focus your talk about integrity. You can mention CIMA's ethical principles, as in there are 5 CIMA ethical principles. This one relates to integrity. This is a breach of integrity because of X, Y, Z. You can do that, but don't then talk about confidentiality. Don't then talk about professional behavior. Don't talk about objectivity and so on, because that is not answering the question. So we're going back to what I was saying earlier in the day about just answering the question that is asked. Don't see something on ethics and then proceed to write everything you know about ethics. Just talk about ethics from the perspective of what is relevant for the exam or for the question that you are answering specifically. Another one you can use here is the American Accounting Resolution Model. Again, this isn't part of the CIMA syllabus necessary, but it is useful in that it provides us with an idea of what ethics is all about. So we've got a few headings here. So who are we providing a duty of care to? If we're providing a duty of care to our employees and we are not caring for them effectively, then are we in breach of ethics as a result of that? Ethical end consequences as well. Why is this bad? What results could have come of this? If we are not acting ethically, what do we value? And what are the cultural norms within our organization and within the country in which we operate in general? And that should help narrow your analysis over ethics, because a lot of people think of ethics sometimes from a personal point of view, as in what personal ethics are rather than what organizational ethics are. And the two can actually be quite different. But essentially at their root, they're all about acting in the right way, acting in the most appropriate way. And that's why I've summarized it here by using the phrase, it's simply the right thing to do. Legally, or something that is legal, or a legal requirement, is something that you have to do. Something that you should ethically do is the right thing to do. You may not legally be bound to do it, it may not be mandatory, but it's the right thing to do. And particularly in this modern era where companies that are acting unethically are found out and it's shared around social media and becomes viral, it's increasingly important to act as ethically as possible. People will actively use ethical organizations or organizations that act ethically over ones that don't, because they feel that it's appropriate to do so. They feel better for doing it. They feel better about themselves for doing it. Now, the Balanced Scorecard, the main model of performance measurement. As strategic managers within the organization, it's very important that we analyze the performance of the organization, because that's how we see how well it is improving, how well we are doing over the course of time. And the reason why the Balanced Scorecard is very useful is because it looks at far more than just finances, because finances, of course, is seen as very much the old way of doing things. And it's still important, and that's why we do have the financial perspective. So we have things like the profit, the return on investment for new projects, the cash flow and the gearing ratio, because those all affect how we run our organization. For example, in the pre-scene, the profit is very high, but then the gearing is very high. So ways in which we can reduce our gearing, monitoring how effectively we are reducing our gearing would be a way of using the financial perspective to monitor performance. The internal perspective is also very important. There are a few key things regarding internal perspective that are important for CouchWeb. Obviously, a lot of it relates to employees, because internal perspective is all about running efficiently and keeping employees satisfied. So employee satisfaction would be important here. How effectively employees are being utilized, what our completion rates are for jobs, a job success rate, on-time completion, have we completed them under budget, and so on. Also investing in IT. I've put that in here because in the pre-scene it mentioned about the importance of investment in IT, because it was relevant for the innovations within the organization. It was even mentioned in the risk report as not keeping up to date with the latest IT, not keeping up to date with the latest technologies was a significant risk. And so the amount we spend on improving our IT would be a good way of monitoring our internal perspective, because it will be improving our efficiency. It will be mitigating the impact of that risk of not having the latest IT. The learning and growth perspective as well, particularly relevant for innovations and projects. In this instance, it would be shows, films, television programs. We know that CouchWeb is investing a lot of money into producing new shows. We know that in real life, companies like Netflix and Amazon are investing a lot of money into producing new shows. And so the number of new shows that we produce, the success of those shows as well, would be good ways to measure our growth. That's one of the things we are looking to grow over the next few years, and so we should be monitoring it closely. And obviously the customer perspective, the subscriber perspective in this instance, would be important as well, because without subscribers we're not going to have any business. Now admittedly we have hundreds of millions of subscribers, and therefore just losing a few may not matter, but of course we want to keep as many as possible and gain as many as possible. And so looking at the amount of customers we have, looking at how many complaints they have, also looking at the average amount of time they stay with us. So if we are perhaps offering a month's free trial, like Netflix do, like Amazon do, how many people continue to stay signed up once that 1 month is over. That would be a good example of how much or how a customer perceives us, how satisfied they are with the service. Also, the length of time they stay as subscribers. Perhaps we should have a target to say we aim for the average amount of time a customer stays with us to be 2 years. And therefore, if the average amount of time is only 6 months, then something is obviously going wrong. Something we need to do something about that to improve our repeat customers. And number 8 is the stakeholder matrix. Stakeholders important for the strategic case study exam. And the reason why we use stakeholders matrix is because when we are doing our analysis, when we are looking at the acceptability of a new project, when we are looking at the acceptability of anything to the organization, the key focus in the acceptability part should be our stakeholders. How are our stakeholders going to react to it? So, of course, we need to be aware of who our stakeholders are, and we also need to realize or be aware of how important each individual stakeholder is, because that will affect something, or that will affect how much we care about their concerns. Now, obviously, we don't want to not care about them. We want to care about our stakeholders as much as possible. But in reality, obviously, employees at suppliers are not going to have as much of an impact on our business as the stars of our own programming, or the board members, or regulatory bodies, broadcasting bodies, etc. And so we use the Mendelow's matrix, which separates our stakeholders out into 4 different groups that are defined by how interested they are in what we are doing and how much power they have to affect what we are doing. So obviously in the top left-hand corner, we have our minimal interest. This is people and individuals with no real power or real interest. So it would be employees of suppliers, or it would be individual members of the public, people who don't use our services. They're not going to care what CouchWeb is doing. And so we don't really need to do anything to worry about them. We don't need to do things that perhaps will negatively impact stakeholders in some of the other quadrants of this matrix to appease members of that quadrant, because they don't really care what we're doing. They're not going to have any impact on us. So then we move right to the keep informed box. So this is people who have interest in what we're doing but don't have that much power. So it'd be smaller suppliers. Notice I've put smaller suppliers in both the minimal interest and keep informed. This depends on the type of supplier that they are. If they're a supplier of content and we are one of their major customers, then of course they're going to have more interest in what we are doing, even if they don't have any power. If they are a supplier of teas and coffees and tea bags and coffee grounds, etc., to our offices, then they're not going to be particularly interested. So whether a small supplier sits in the keep informed or the minimal interest depends on the type of thing that they supply. The employees will be in this box as well, because an individual employee is not going to have that much power unless they are particularly important, and they're not. But they are going to have a lot of interest in what we're doing. It's important that we do keep our employees satisfied, though, because of the fact that we know from the nature of the industry that top employees are often headhunted by other organizations. And subscribers as well, individual subscribers. Of course, they're going to be interested. They're going to want to know when new shows are coming out. They're going to want to be kept up to date with changes to the way in which the website works, the way in which applications work, the facilities available. Perhaps they're looking for that ability to download that Amazon and Netflix provide that we currently don't. And so they'll be keeping an eye on us. The bottom left-hand corner, we move into the stakeholders with a lot of power, starting with the keep satisfied, who are ones with power, but not too much interest. And the classic examples of keep satisfied stakeholders are banks and governments. And the reason for this is because the bank lends us a lot of money. We have very high debt at the moment in the organization, so banks are going to be lending us a lot of money. They don't care what we do, how we do it, as long as we pay back our interest. And therefore, they fall into this category because they don't really care what we're doing. They don't care how we're running our organization. They don't want to know about new shows that we're producing or anything like that. They just want to make sure that we pay our interest payments on time. And therefore, they fall into this category because, of course, they do have a lot of power. If we didn't, they may fine us. They may stop lending us any more money in the future or take us to court over the money that has not been paid. Same with the government. Government don't really care what we're doing on a day-to-day basis, but they would have a lot of power if suddenly we did something that was illegal, if we suddenly produced a show that breached rules of broadcasting, whether it online or on television. Suddenly they would care. If we didn't pay our taxes or we tried to get out of paying our taxes, they would care. If we were mistreating employees and not abiding by employment law that was imposed in Mainland, then they would care. But as long as we run our organization correctly, efficiently and legally, the government aren't really going to step in and do anything. And finally we have our key players box, which would contain the founders and the board. Obviously they have a lot of power and care very deeply for what's going on in the organization. The founders in particular, it's their company, it's their baby, so to speak. They will not want to do anything that damages it. Internal and external regulatory bodies, broadcasting organizations, etc., ensuring that we're not putting anything online that could be considered offensive or too offensive or extremist or anything like that. You look at what's happened with YouTube recently. A lot of people have, or a lot of organizations have been trying to get them to crack down on extremist content, such as very far-right white supremacists videos and Islamic terrorism videos and things like that have all been freely available online. YouTube has tried to argue that because it's a platform, it's not responsible for what is on there, and that it's freedom of speech to post whatever you want on there. But obviously, if new broadcasting laws were to come into place, then that could have a big impact on the organization. Also, when we think about ethics as well, maybe YouTube doesn't have a legal responsibility to stop white supremacist right-wing videos being put on YouTube, but perhaps it has an ethical responsibility to stop it. And also stars of the own programming as well. They'll be very important because some of our own programmings are incredibly important to the organization, provide us a lot of business. A lot of people sign up with Couchweb because they'll want to watch the politics game and so on. And so the star of that show is going to have a lot of power. And I put big suppliers in the border between Keep Satisfied and Key Players because as major suppliers, they're likely to have a lot of their own business. They're likely to have a lot of big customers who compete with us. And so they're not going to rely on us to make their business sustainable. So they may fall into this more Keep Satisfied category, but then some of them may feel that we are their most important client because we are the market leader, and they in turn do have a lot of impact on our business. So I've put them on the border here between Keep Satisfied and Key Players. Because, of course, if, say, Magic Media were to suddenly decide they weren't going to supply our business anymore, then that would be an enormous amount of content that we'd lose. Over 38% of our movies come from Magic Media, and so given the amount of movies we have, that's nearly 1,000 movies, and so we would suddenly have a lot less content to provide to our our subscribers. And of course, if we aren't providing that much content, if we are not providing as much decent content, they're more likely to switch to another provider.